I'm a sweaty mess. It was 38 degrees in my car on the way home from work. But anyway, level with me. How do you give a player character a meaningful send-off? It's session 0, it's a conversation to have. How will your table deal with character death? Will the player physically leave the session that evening, or will they sit and roll a new character there and then, while the rest of the table keep playing? But then, when is that new character gonna join the party? It has to make sense narratively, but then what happens to their previous character? Will they get the send-off that they deserve? And it's that question, that last question, that we're gonna be talking about today, because there are so many caveats to it, which could lead to future storylines for the party and the future character that will be joining the party. But before we jump into the video, just a reminder that this table works with shared experience, so any tips, tricks or thoughts on the subject, leave them in the comments below to dish out some XP to the other players in our community, and I'll be sure to check them out as well. Tell me, how does your table deal with character deaths? I feel disgusting. When the character fails their last death save, you have to start thinking about the context in which they lost their final hit points. Where were they? Who were they fighting? And was there a chance they could have been saved? These are the questions that you have to ask as either Dungeon Master or other player, because this death could have ripple effects for the remaining characters. Where were they? This is important because where the party is geographically can have some immediate repercussions. If they're in the middle of a sizable town, then there are going to be witnesses to what happened. However, if a PC dies, but it was the party who initiated the fight in the town, then those witnesses are going to have a different opinion to if the party was ambushed whilst innocently walking down the street. If they're fighting out in a distant woodlands far away from civilization, then there's going to be less chance that they could seek help. Someone with suitable magic in order to stop or delay the player character becoming undead. In a big city, there's more chance that they're going to find an NPC with healing powers such as Gentle Repose or Revivify, which means the party must come to a decision if they're in the woodlands. Will they be escorting the body of their friend back to town, or will they leave them there? Who were the party fighting? If the party were fighting the big bad of the campaign, then it's a little different than a random encounter on the road. You know, your wolves, your bandits. Big old difference, isn't there? If it's the big bad who takes down the character, then there are two different types of player character deaths that can be poignant for that moment in the campaign. Of course, there's the final fight, trying to alleviate the region of this dictator that's been lording it over the people, their final attempt to stop this tyrannical leader from carrying out their dastardly deeds and relieving the people of their so-called leadership. But let's be honest, that kind of fight doesn't need explaining to why the death would be important. However, if this is an early fight with the BBEG, like, for want of a better word, they're ending the first arc of the campaign just to set up the next stretch, and it just so happens that the BBEG knocks off one of the PCs, then how does that affect the rest of the characters' mindsets? Did they actually care about that party member? And that's important, we're going to come back to that later, because if they truly did, then they're going to feel this anger and this desire to avenge their fallen comrade, and to lock and load and seek revenge against the BBEG.
Morning.
So when they do next encounter the big bad, the players can have something to play off of, that anger that they have for this NPC. But on the flip side, if they are managed to be taken down by a wolf in the wild, what ripple effects will happen then? Well, if they're a battle-hard barbarian, maybe, and this, again, is something we're going to talk about later, it might actually ruin their good reputation with the clan they fought with. However, if they were a druid, and they were knocked off by a wolf in the wild, the archdruid of their clan might say something like, "Ah yes, one with Mother Earth always, may they rest in peace." And then they get a very respectful send-off. Could the player character have been saved? What if the cleric hadn't rolled minimal healing on their healing word? What if another player character hadn't failed their medicine check while trying to stabilize their friend? They actually made it worse in the moment. What if the other party member didn't roll a natural 1 on their attack roll against the BBEG, which then allowed the BBEG to get one more attack in to kill the player character? Any of these scenarios will weigh heavy on the player character. They could have saved someone, but they failed. As a DM, I would say that as a game mechanic, their next roll, doing that action, would be at disadvantage while they contemplate and overthink the outcome of the action they're about to make, when thinking about their friend who they let down. But maybe that overthinking will actually drive them forward and will further character development. And that is what we're going to be talking about next. So hot! I'm absolutely going to the pub after this. Ugh. Okay. Havard, the Half-Orc monk. In the campaign that I was a player in that has just finished, we had a character death in our party 5 sessions before the end of the campaign, in which Havard had to make a choice about who to save. Another player accidentally tripped a hidden explosive in a tavern. Well, it was hidden, but they spotted it, and my DM described it as looking awfully grenade-looking, and then the player still pulled the pin on it! What are you doing? Everything, quite frankly, went to Fire expanded across the entirety of the ground floor, blocking the front door as an exit route. So we ran up the stairs, but then accidentally tripped another IED, putting two of our party members down, as well as an NPC who we had practically put into witness protection. Apparently not very well, because the tavern was being attacked. We live and we learn. One of the player characters who went down was a heavy, wide-set, lumbering warforged called Marks. So when Havard had to make the decision about who to save, my DM said that I could either roll a straight strength check, which is Havard's best stat, to save the warforged, or I could save the NPC for free, as he was a fairy, then roll athletics, which he has expertise in, to save the other player character as well. I could juggle them both and try and get them into a fireman's lift over each one of my shoulders. Before I made the decision, I asked the DM whether Havard would know where the Warforged's memory bank is, for want of a better phrase, and my DM straight up said, I don't know. Would Havard know where it was? And I said, no, because Havard was never too keen on a robot trying to do his job. He was that kind of character.
I'm kidding. Hey guys, check it out. We got one of those tin cans here.
He was looking for that character development where it's like, oh, robots are actually quite useful. That was the arc I was going for. But alas, it never happened. Because I opted to make an athletics check to save both the NPC who we put into witness protection and the other player character, leaving Marks in the fire in the tavern slowly to melt. I took both the NPC and the other player character out of the window of the tavern's first floor and had slow fall on the way down, so we didn't take any damage. So Marks's metal frame was left in the bonfire of the bar, and the player was relieved of his character. And that's where we ended the session. And I apologized profusely to the player whose character was no longer, and they said it was fine because it made sense narratively, which I still feel bad about. I'm so sorry if you're watching this video. So whilst Havard didn't really care for the player character, see, I told you we'd talk about that later, he cared about letting his team down because he's an ex-soldier and he feels like he should have been able to do more. So how could I use this to my advantage when it comes to character development? Havard had always used his brute force to get him through the task at hand, but this choice he made actually inspired him to try and learn something about healing magic and capabilities. So I asked my DM for the potential idea that Havard would spend time with the medics in the soldier barracks and able to learn some skills, with the intention that I would multi-class into a cleric on my next level up. Hey, I know, it's not the optimum build a monk cleric, but shh, we don't tell each other how to have fun on this channel. I think it would have been quite cool, and my justification will back me up. A new proficiency with the shield, key points to spend on patient defense to impose disadvantage on enemy attacks, and then the ability to heal. This means that I could actually just plonk Havard in front of an injured ally, and as a half-orc shield, I could become a really effective combat medic. He would go for his soldier heritage, but down a different avenue, which I think would be really cool narratively. I'm using that PC death to further my character so we can really think about how he's going to change and develop as a person. But what about the overall plot and the overarching storyline? How does character death change it? The plot. This is very much for the DM to make use of, to make interesting links between the character who has passed and the world that they are living in. So let's revisit the other point I mentioned earlier. Let's stick with this barbarian theme. If the barbarian in the party is taken down by the BBEG, then maybe their clan will lend them their steel and shields and swords and aid you in the next fight against the BBEG to avenge their fallen brother. But if the barbarian were to fall in a battle against Boblin the Goblin, then maybe their clan would look down on you. You were the people that let their brethren down. He fell to such a pitiful enemy and you could not help him in the slightest. Don't come knocking on our door when you need to help. We're embarrassed for you. We will no longer be offering our services as mercenaries. No. Okay, please tell me we quick saved before the battle. We needed that ally. Boom, you've been cut off from a section of the city entirely. Did the PC that failed their death saves have friendships outside of the group? Who's gonna break it to them? Do you turn up at the widow's house with your hat in your hand, clenched against your chest to tell her that Dave was trampled by an owlbear? Do you go back to the bar that Francine frequented in her younger days? And when you tell the landlord, he rings the bell and he announces the news to the patrons, and everyone raises their glasses and proceeds to tell stories of Francine's bravery in the face of adversity, and they drink the night away and celebrate her life.
Pour some out for one's homies.
Yes, you have to break the news to the friends and family of the character, but what happens when the character's enemies find out about the news? What if the character had debts owed to some shady people in town? Who's going to pick up that tab? Because it's highly unlikely that a loan shark is just going to forget about the 500 gold they loaned the character because of the party bereavement. Don't worry about it. We'll let this one slide. No, they're going to break some kneecaps, aren't they? Look who's they going to break? The parties, that's who. I think that the Dungeon Master should aim to get one more storyline out of a character death, if the opportunity arises, that is. It'll be a way to leave a legacy to remember them by, whether that be for good or for bad. But either way, the remaining players should always have a chance to bring closure to the character's demise. For the creative Dungeon Master, this is an opportunity to show off, provided you get permission from the player whose character passed. You need to tell that player whose character died your idea for the plot that comes from their character's death, and then, if the player is happy with the arrangement, you can weave their new character into that plot further down the line somehow. In the campaign where Havard failed to save the player character, the player took up the mantle of one of our favorite NPCs 3 sessions later. But now back to our hypothetical campaign. Imagine the other players in the party's surprise when 3 sessions later, they arrive at a bar they're being directed to meet a mysterious contact, somehow loosely linked to the previous player character, only to realize that the client they're meeting is the new player character. What if there's a mysterious person at the character's wake? And then it turns out that the player attended their own funeral as the new player character. I couldn't find a single clip for Stranger at a Funeral. Can you imagine? So many soap operas out there. Couldn't think of one to use here. Surely EastEnders has had a mysterious person at a funeral. Surely. But then, what if the funeral has been sabotaged? And suddenly... Now that is a decent future plot hook for the party. Thank you, CSI. And that has been my 2 cents on how to handle D&D character deaths. As per usual, any tips, tricks, or thoughts, leave them in the comments below to dish out some XP to the other players in our community, and I'll be sure to check them out as well. See you in the next session. I'm off to the pub, because I am boiling. I need a cider and black. Oh, cider and blackcurrant? Yes, please. Drink responsibly.